relaxing. So go ahead and pour yourself a little drink, whether that's a beer or a wine, cocktail, mocktail, water, tea, anything in between. And then also get yourself your favorite little snack so that we can just be kind of kicking back and relaxing for the evening here. And then the third and final piece there is that we aren't going to be doing as much with the screen share this evening. So you don't necessarily need to be watching the screen for the entirety of the session. It's going to be more of like an audio experience here. And so with that being said, if you want to be starting some seeds throughout, doing some potting up, doing some work in your garden, if you've still got light and it's warm enough, then I really do encourage you just kind of have the headphones in, be pitter-pattering throughout your yard, your house over the course of our session, and just taking in the conversation between Ashley and I. Alrighty, I'm seeing a whole bunch of messages coming through, and all of you, for the most part, I think maybe except for Shannon, are incorrect because this is our very first gardening happy hour. We have done plenty, or excuse me, gardening talk show. We've done plenty of happy hours, but this is the very first one on that front. So two slightly different kind of programs there. Wanted to ask that as a little bit of a trick question. Shout out to Shannon for getting that one squared away. And so for those of you that I have not met before, I'm Jordan from Mind and Soil. I'm going to be kind of hosting things this evening here. I founded the company in December of 2020, so about 16 months ago, with kind of the hope and intention of introducing 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. And I think that a huge way of going about that is through education. You know, for myself, I've learned so much through YouTube here and from all the brilliant gardeners that are on the platform. And because of that, I was able to kind of tap into that mental health side of gardening more quickly. And so we feel a big kind of responsibility and duty on our end to be continuing that and adding as much value and content to the gardening world as possible so that you all can be feeling comfortable and confident in the garden. So if there's one thing that I recommend doing right now is just below the video here, there's a little red subscribe button. And I encourage you to hit that subscribe button there because we put out about 2 videos every single week to kind of be taking as much of the guesswork out of gardening as possible. So go ahead and subscribe there. And the next video is actually coming out tomorrow morning. And now for this evening, less of the talking is going to be done by me because we have an absolutely amazing guest with us, Ashley Lebrec. You're going to have to correct me if I got that wrong on the last name there. Goes by the Soil Scientist and runs an absolutely incredible YouTube channel, Gardening in Canada. Full confession from my end, this is the channel that I have been absolutely binging in 2022. So to have Ashley on as the first guest, I'm just super excited about. And so Ashley, I would love to just kind of pass it over to you for a quick hello, and maybe just sharing a little bit about kind of like what your gardening and agricultural journey has been to date.
Hi guys, if you don't know who I am, my name is Ashley Lebrec. You did pronounce it correctly, so good. Yeah, so I basically went to the University of Saskatchewan, and in my course of studies, I studied soil science. And I was initially going in to be a veterinarian, but I was really upset about animal suffering. So I decided to go to what I thought was the most dead thing out there, soil. Turns out it's more alive and intense than I ever thought it would be. So it was my next second best choice. The reason why I fell into it was because I grew up gardening at a very young age. I used to have my own like plot of garden at my grandma's house that I would destroy because I overwatered it, I overcared for it. And I've just been gardening for, 25 years. So it started with that. It evolved into houseplants when I was about 15, really exotic plant species, fish tanks, aquatic fish tanks, fully planted, you name it. And then it's landed me here. So when I initially got out of university, I was doing lots of like R&D stuff in the agricultural field. So I was doing pesticide research. I did microbe research, and then I transitioned into some greenhouse wheat breeding. And then now I basically work in the field of fertilizer, soil science, and more specifically than that, gas versions of fertilizer, of nitrogen fertilizer. And I have my YouTube channel, which has somehow pretty much taken over my entire life at this point. So
The YouTube channel is incredible there. And I didn't realize that it's been such a kind of journey for you and the amount of time that you've spent gardening over all of the years, which kind of leads into some kind of like, I guess, introduction questions that I'd like to go through with you before we dive into the meat and potatoes. And so, folks, if you have any questions on anything soil related, go ahead and type those into the chat function. Just go ahead and kind of ask some of them. And then we're going to go ahead and pop some of those over to Ashley here. But Ashley, we're going to get started with a couple of kind of, let's call them a little bit of like the easy lob pitches here for you to get warmed up on. And so you have been gardening for a long period of time there. What was the first plant or crop that you grew?
oh my goodness. It would have to be tomatoes. I can guarantee you, I don't remember because it's been so long, but I can guarantee you it was tomatoes.
Nice.
Guarantee you it was tomatoes. That or it would be marigolds. I used to be obsessed with marigolds when I was little. So
tomatoes was the first on my side as well. And in my first year of gardening, I yielded a whopping 1 tomato. And I've shared this with some of the folks in the community where it's like, everybody talks about how a homegrown tomato, nothing tastes better than it. This one tasted so bad, like so chalky, so terrible, which you might have to shed a little bit of light on in terms of what might have been happening in the soil on that front. But we can circle back to that a little bit later on. So next question for you there, Ashley, is what's your biggest garden flop or failure that you can recall?
Okay, so I actually have 2. But my biggest one was some raised beds that I installed about 8 years ago. And the soil choice that I went with, what I thought it was and what it ended up being were 2 very drastically different things. And so these raised beds to this day need way more water than any other portion of my garden, completely based on the poor soil choice that I made. So that was my first one. My second one I made about 5 years ago. And it was when I picked up some compost from this city and it had some reminiscent herbicide in it, or it wasn't properly cured. And it ended up taking out an entire batch of tomato plants and all the leaves curled in and the plants just all died because of it. So that was my second really poor choice.
Oh no.
Yeah. An entire summer just wasted.
And with the bed that you filled up, you haven't, it sounds like the soil's still in there. So you didn't want to like just get rid of it and start from scratch. Would it have been, I guess, too big of a project at that front?
No, it's only because I know that you can work with soil. So I know that you can like build things up in it to help with like water retention and things of that nature. And so it takes time. Soil doesn't change overnight. It doesn't even change over a season. So I knew within about 3-ish seasons that I'd be able to achieve the water holding capacity and stuff that I was needing. And sure enough, this last 2 years, I've been able to make, or I guess 3-ish years, I've been able to really make those flower beds work for me. So it just takes time and patience.
Absolutely. Love it. All right. So if you could grow one crop for the rest of your life, but you're not allowed to grow anything else besides that one crop, it's the only thing that you get to grow, which crop would you go with?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
Hands down tomatoes.
How come?
If you saw my canning room, you would be like, okay, this makes sense.
Really?
It's just salsas, tomato paste, spaghetti sauce, you name it. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. So similar question. If you could use only one gardening tool for the rest of your life and you have to do every gardening task with it. So I'm talking about digging things, cutting things, building things. What's the one tool that you would use for the rest of your life and you're not allowed to use anything else?
Hori hori knife.
Right? The greatest thing ever.
Yeah. I know. And I didn't discover it until I went to university.
You know,
that was like a requirement for soil class, like field soil class. You had to have a hori hori knife, mandatory.
Yeah, we started carrying them this year, and like we sold through our first like 150 of them within like just like the last few months alone. The one thing that I wish they had on them was kind of like a little bit of like a hook at the top, so you could like get it right around like a little twig or a branch and just
Oh, yeah. That's actually not a bad idea. Even if they put it on the handle, that'd be like ideal.
Yeah, totally.
Oh.
Okay, so then I guess moving forward to this year, what's the crop that you're most excited to be growing in this kind of 2022 season coming up?
So I'm actually trying auto flowering cannabis for the first time ever. And I'm excited to grow it because I've heard it's very, very difficult and it's a pain in the butt. So I just want to see like how big of a pain in the butt it really is. I'm also attempting loofahs in Canada, which I mean may or may not be a good choice. I'm not entirely sure yet how that's going to pan out. I have a 4 foot tall loofah in my grow tent currently, and it's just blizzard yesterday. So I'm not sure how that's going to pan out for me,
Yeah,
but we'll see.
the weather this year, I guess, yeah, has just been kind of unbelievable in so many ways here. I feel like all of us across the board, it's been like really, really cold and chilly. And we're all like chomping at the bit and trying to be patient with getting things moved outside into the garden.
Oh gosh, yes, yes, absolutely.
Well, we're going to go ahead and dive into, I guess, some more like kind of soil specific questions here. And as I do this, I'm going to turn the screen share off so that Ashley and my video take up the entirety of the screen. If anything drops here, just bear with me for a couple of moments, folks. And Ashley, as I do that, one question that came through was from Carolyn, just in terms of the soil situation that you had there with that bed that you filled up. Carolyn asked, your compost story from the city is scary. I'm scheduled to pick up compost from the city of Calgary next week. How can I tell if it's okay? And I guess just any tips that you have when getting soil compost from the city.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. What I would recommend doing and what I know to do, and I just chose not to do, would be just to go get some broad, like peas. You can buy peas in like 1 kilogram packs. They're incredibly inexpensive. And they're actually, the legume family is exceptionally sensitive to any form of herbicides. And typically speaking, the compost that ends up in the city compost is going to have broadleaf desiccants or herbicides in them rather than monocot or grass herbicides. And this is just because people are spraying their lawns, they're spraying the ditches. If you get like hay or straw mulch, again, they're going to use a broadleaf desiccant on it. So if we plant broadleaf peas or just snap peas in that compost or in that soil, we'll very quickly notice if there's any issues. Now, if it's been cured long enough, so if it's been cured for a year, and say they use pyrrolate herbicide in it, it can take up to 534 days that's like the half-life of the product. So you may notice that the peas grow, but they look stunted or small or awkward. And that's a sign that that's still there, but the leaves should curl and look really tumultuous. And then if you can, I would do like a tray with the city compost. And then I would do just a tray of like regular potting soil, mind and soil potting soil. And just put that in a tray and fill them up, germinate peas in one, germinate peas in the other, and then compare the two against each other. If you're noticing larger, flatter leaves on the potting soil and you're noticing curling or cupping or really spindly looking plants, that's a sign that there's herbicides in there. And it doesn't mean the compost is junk. You just have to give it time for the soil microbes, because that's actually what soil microbes do. They eat pesticides, which sounds bizarre, but they'll actually eat and degrade at those over time. Now, if you wanted to use the compost right off the bat and you're like, no, screw it, I need it, plant ornamental grasses, asparagus, corn, load it up with corn, load it up with monocot plants. Your monocot plants are going to grow fine in a compost that may have some herbicide in it. And that's just because that's not what the herbicide's geared towards killing, right? So those plants will do fine in there, and you can grow in those still, but do not plant tomatoes. Do not plant anything with flat, broad leaves. That's not going to end up well for you.
All right.
From experience.
This is why I think I've loved so much of your channel this year, as I've been kind of binging through it, is that like I understand some parts of gardening and at like a very like hobbyist backyard gardener manner, but I don't understand them at like the deep science level there. So I guess first question on that front is, what's a monocot?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So monocot is essentially grass species. So it has very specific seed structure, very specific root structures, leaf structure, flowering structures, all that sort of stuff goes into monocots. Dicots have, again, specific root structures, specific leaves, flowers, you name it. So anything with big flat leaves like this and all the plants behind me, those are all dicot plants. Onions, garlic, leeks, anything that looks like a grass, that is a monocot plant. So, and plant scientists have realized that these plants metabolize certain toxins in different ways. And so that's what herbicides are for now. We will have herbicides that are specifically meant to kill dandelions without killing the grass. So
Gotcha.
how it ends up in our compost, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Okay. So just to make sure I'm following things here, getting compost for first time, essentially from a new supplier or something where I'm not 100% sure on how well it's going to perform, what I could do is plant some peas in there and compare them to soil that I know is going to work well and is just in a really good position. And then I can see if they're growing equally well, or if the new supplier that I'm not familiar with is maybe, not quite, they're not doing quite as well as my known supplier. And in that instance, then I can still either give that, compost some time to further break down, or I could be planting those monocots into it and saving my dicots for the other parts of my garden where I know I've already got good established soil. Would that be correct?
100% correct. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And I would encourage people to do that with like all compost that they get. Like, don't be fooled by packages that say organic. They have to have OMRI certified on it. They have to have a little bit of legitimacy behind them, because technically organic, and this is a gardening community issue. This isn't an issue in agriculture, because in agriculture, there are so many rules and regulations behind it. Agriculture, Agri-Foods Canada has really cracked down on this sort of thing. But in the gardening community, we're very easily misled. And so marketing will say organic. And so, yes, of course, compost is organic. It doesn't have any inorganic compounds in it. However, it doesn't mean it doesn't contain herbicides, pesticides, that sort of thing. Yeah. So even if the packaging says organic, I would still do the test just to make sure.
Totally.
So,
and hey, I might just have you keep your mic a little bit closer up. It's just coming through.
Oh, it's weak.
Just a little bit there. But continuing along, I think this is such an interesting area because there's compost products that you could buy from a garden center and nursery that are bagged, but then you go to a soil depot and it's just like these huge areas, and it's like very challenging, probably impossible to know just from like an eyeball test what you're getting yourself into. So I guess from your perspective, when it comes to like one of those early on pieces of selecting compost to be bringing back into your garden, what would be 2 or 3 of the things that you would really encourage kind of keeping an eye on or looking out for when it comes to selecting that compost product?
So one thing you want to look for is whether or not the company is curing the compost. So you want a cure time that's at least 3 months. The longer, the better. Unfortunately, city compost and cold climates, it doesn't always cure long enough. And that's just because the demand is so high, so they don't have time to cure. So that's one thing I would definitely look for. The other things that you want to look for is chunks. If it's chunky, that's a sign it's not cured or it hasn't been decomposed long enough. You want it to look like soil. You want it to look like potting soil. So that's one of your first signs. Other things you can look for is plastic bits and bobs. I've seen that before as well in compost. That's another sign that that's likely organic, but not organic compost. And then other than that, you just want to make sure that the supplier that you're getting from, either it can have the OMRI listing, I'm not too concerned with that, but that there's some sort of reliability behind the person you're buying from. So can you put a face to the name? Do you have resources to contact the person if something goes wrong with that compost, that sort of thing? And so if you can go for like smaller companies, that's always nice. If you can go for local compost, there's nothing wrong with that. Being able to communicate with the people who work at these facilities is nice because you can ask them questions. Buying it from landscapers, they're going to know their compost well enough if there's any issues. And just avoid like big brand name companies. I find sometimes one year gardening products will be super good, and then the next year the gardening products will be super poor. And this last 24 months ish, since the gardening blowout that everyone's getting into gardening, I've noticed a drastic decline in the actual quality of these products. So it's shocking. Like if there's any gardeners on here who are gardening prior to the boom, I feel like you would also understand what I'm saying, but it's just the quality. I think they're just manufacturing so much of it. It's difficult for them to keep up.
Totally. And it's something that like we've heard from people where like they've bought bags of things and they're like, this is just like a completely different product.
It is.
Like they, to the extent that they've like switched off of utilizing it, which is, I guess, yeah, it's kind of fascinating, the state of gardening, like incredible in some ways that so many people are getting into it. But at the same time, it's almost like the amount of like supply of goods available to gardeners is not where we would, I guess, need for it to be for everybody to have those perfect and great products on their end.
Yeah, it's shocking. It's like literally shocking. So
yeah. So this leads into like one of the questions that I'm most fascinated about and curious about for myself as a gardener. So this is a fully selfish question from my end.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I think it's probably going to end up being a two-part question. But the first part is that like I've built my beds with effectively like 100% compost. And I add more compost each season to kind of top it up, get the nutrients in there, following the Charles Dowding methodology, which I've seen you comment on in a few of your videos. And so I guess at a top level, we're both laughing here, is like, how much compost is too much compost? Or like, are there things that I might be doing wrong that you need to like slap my wrists on right now? Give it to me straight, Ashley.
So I hesitate now from bringing up like the no dig, Charles Dowding methodology.
Let's actually go back a step, because that's the second part of my question, is that like,
okay,
I think that there is a level of like shaming that occurs if somebody does not do no dig, no till gardening.
yes.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it coming from like the agricultural space and like what's actually going on here.
So it's people trying to sell stuff, right? They're trying to sell like dogma or ideologies, because what do you sell in gardening? There's not much you can sell other than ideas that are the greatest, the latest and greatest, right? So I'm not dogmatic in how I garden whatsoever. I'm not opposed to a rototiller. I'm not opposed to a double dig, and I'm not opposed to a no dig. There's different soil types that benefit from different management perspectives. So in agriculture, for example, when you're talking about agricultural sides of things, what I've seen personally in the field is we went from no-till, low-till, and anyone who's Canadian who's watching this, just a heads up, a huge portion of the prairie provinces and Canada actually in general is no-till or low-till farming, and that actually is from a government mandate. There was incentives not to, so you would get paid for not tilling or using low-till methods. But what we're starting to discover in agriculture and as soil scientists is that there's this hard pan layer forming. And so the hard pan layer is forming from equipment moving over over top of the surface, and there's no manipulation of that surface whatsoever. So we end up with this hard pan, and hard pan is like a really severe version of compaction where the plant roots literally cannot penetrate. So in order to reclaim that or fix that, we have to start implementing things like vertical tillage. And so this isn't something that we utilize every single year. This is like a prescription solution that we help farmers fix their soil with, because if it gets too severe, we don't have oxygen, we don't have microbial activity, we end up with waterlogged soils. So we'll end up with lots of ponds and water accumulation. So to eliminate that, we use tillage. And I think for gardeners, if you're having water issues, then it may be time to till. Really great way to actually look at that and figure that out is to dig something we call a soil profile. And then after you dig that soil profile, go in and look at what colors you can see in that soil profile. And it should be deep. We're talking like 2-3 feet if you can. If you don't have, the elbow grease to do it over a couple of days, whatever the case is, but we want to dig down. Then we want to take a butter knife or a hori knife, and we want to clean the actual surface off. And we just want to look for different colors in that spectrum. So if we're seeing grays and whites, this is a sign of alluviation. This means that we have water that's draining out of our system way too quickly. If we have red bands or red dots that kind of look like rust, this is a sign that our water is actually sitting in our soil for far too long, and your soil may be suffering from compaction, despite the fact that you may think it's not. And then if you're noticing blues or blue grays in it, this is a sign that you have anaerobic soil. So you actually have a high water table, or you literally have 0 to no drainage in that soil. So that's ways we can determine whether or not rototilling is necessary. Now, for you on your no dig side, I was reading some of your comments in like the show notes, and you said you tested your soil and it came out to 40% organic material. And I right away said, without you even saying no dig, and I was like, oh, this guy's doing no dig. I 100% knew what you were doing, because that's the only time I ever see soil tests come back with higher than 5% organic material. Yeah. So when that happens, we aim in soil science, we aim for between 5 and 10% organic material. This is what we encourage farmers to achieve, organic or otherwise. This is what we would encourage gardeners to achieve if there was soil scientists working in gardening. 40% is too high. And 40%, while it sounds like a good idea, can actually cause issues. So one of the things you mentioned was really high organic material, really low nitrogen. And this is one of the symptoms of having too much organic material in our actual soil. So what you're gardening in right now is basically a soil-less medium. So you're kind of digging or dealing with soil that isn't quite soil. And so you would actually or should manage that slightly differently than you would an actual soil material. Now, I'm assuming there's soil under there. It just hasn't been quite incorporated yet. And so what happens when we have organic material in excess is our nitrogen and our carbon gets locked up. So it's not uncommon for soil tests. They won't generally test for soil carbon, only because it's not that we're not interested in it. It's just really, it's information that doesn't benefit the conventional farmer. It only benefits people who are trying to achieve like organic microbe activity, that sort of thing. So I'm assuming your carbon actually is really low too. And it's because you have really high levels of microbial activity in that soil. And all those microbes are focused on decomposing this massive layer of organic material. And we call that the O horizon. And so because they're so focused on that, in order for them to decompose, they actually need to use nitrogen and carbon as fuel sources. And so that's where they're actually pulling all your nitrogen and carbon out of the soil to try to decompose the compost. And so there is some such a thing as too much. One thing we find when you add too much compost or too much manure, or year after year, we end up with volatilization. So compost, for example, despite what some people may say on the internet, does volatilize CO2. It does not allow your soil to sequester CO2. So your soil has gone from a CO2 sequestering profile into something that's actually releasing CO2 at astronomical levels. Other things that will gas off would be ammonium gas. So that's another version. And then leaching. If the compost doesn't have anywhere in the soil to go because the soil battery is charged up and full of nutrients, it'll just leach out of the system itself. So what you can do to prevent this is use like a lime, a gypsum, rock dust is the more expensive version of those two, and actually coat your compost or coat whatever you're top dressing with on that. And science has shown that it drastically reduces CO2 losses from compost. So if you have a compost bin in the backyard, adding some rock dust, lime, gypsum, whatever the case is, into that is going to help to reduce the loss of CO2 from those. So ideally, I'm a simple gardener. I only add compost once every 3-ish years, and I only do about 1 to 2 inches. And I know that sounds drastically different than what other people are doing out there, but that's just how I manage my system. So it's kind of up to you.
I want to chat more about, kind of like how I could go, I guess, adjusting that bed on my end. One kind of follow-up question that I have on that front was that I think it was like the garden socks that you did a video on.
Yeah.
And you're filling those up, I think, with 100% compost. So it's kind of like, is there ever a place for just going full on compost, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So it's so funny. I had to redo that video for the sponsor because I initially filled the socks up with potting soil.
Okay.
And I used like a peat compost mix. I just did a regular potting soil. And I had to go back and change the video to say 100% compost because that's what they want in their socks. And I tried to explain to them, like, you realize that your plants are going to do poorly in this soil. Like, they're not going to maximize their ability. And they're like, no, we know what we're doing. And I was like, okay.
First of all, thank you so much for being willing to answer that question, because that's like a bit of a tough question where I'm like, but hold on, I saw in one of your videos you're using compost and like,
yeah.
So I really, really appreciate the just kind of like backstory on what actually happened there. And it leads to, I guess, another question from my end before then, talking about how to maybe fix my bed. And that is, what if you're growing in containers and in grow bags? Like, what would you go with for a soil blend on that front for those in the audience that are in more of a container grow bag environment?
Yeah, so grow bags and container gardens, this is soilless medium. So us using potting soils we're not worried about nitrogen movement and carbon movement and all that sort of stuff. But I would advocate for you to use a peat or coconut coir base, 75-ish% of that being coconut coir or peat, and then the remainder being a compost. Now, with that being said, I'm talking from a perspective of someone who's repotting every single year and recharging that potting soil mix. So if the intent isn't to recharge and your intent is to fill and leave it be, then I would do like a 50-50. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the potting soil people is that if you're using peat or coconut coir, you will end up with a really acidic potting soil mix. And so I would encourage using lime in your potting soils to help neutralize that pH, bring it up a little bit. If you're noticing things like blossom end rot in your containers on like your peppers, your tomatoes, this is a sign that that pH is starting to affect the actual plants, or that whatever potting soil mix you're using or compost mix you're using doesn't have enough calcium and magnesium in it. So, and that is a concern when we're using potting soil mixes because we're not dealing with real soil. So we don't end up with that glacial, because that's what soil is, glacial decomposition, basically, that's taking place over thousands of years. We don't have that in our potting soils. So making sure you get a really high quality compost is going to be key there. If you don't think your compost is high quality, go to the garden, take a spade, substitute the 25% out, do 15% compost, and do 10% actual soil. So then you can hopefully achieve some micro nutrient in that profile.
Okay.
So,
and so now, like scaling up from there, if you're filling a 4 foot by 8 foot raised bed first time, what would you go with to fill that up with?
yeah, so it depends on your budget. Budget's a big deal. Don't hurt yourselves over trying to fill it up with straight soil. You can do like a hugelkultur bottom to it. If you do the hugelkultur bottom, make sure that your wood, sticks, twigs, leaves, whatever you put in the bottom is well decomposted. I saw Instagram reel the other day, and I never comment or critique anyone out there in the gardening community because everyone's on their own journey. So, I mean, do you like experiment away? But I saw someone in the southern states, they're rotating out their cold climate crops for their warm climate crops, and they were just pulling out green plants with potting soil and putting it in the bottom of their raised bed to fill. And I was like, oh, Wanda, you are going to have serious amounts of nitrogen and carbon lock up in that soil, but you do you. So avoid green, go for browns and old and gritty stuff. And then put that in the bottom and then do a loam with compost. So if you can do a straight loam is ideal. If you had to, or you're in a slightly warmer climate or a cooler climate, with high levels of precipitation, you may be able to get away with a sandy loam, but take it from someone who got a sandy loam. You will maybe need to water if it warms up too much in your area. And I'm in a zone 3 and I regret that decision. And then if you're in a warmer environment with low levels of precipitation, I would bump up the compost level. So you would want to do around the 25% to 30% compost, mixed in to the loam, not like top dressed at all, but actually physically mixed in. And then if you are in a cold, wet environment, you can do like 15% ish compost, and then actually mix that in, and then make sure you're doing like a top dressing of some sort of compost, 1-2 inches, and then mulching on top of that. And my mulch is super ghetto. I just literally use grass clippings is my thing. So just get it done.
I guess to build that loam, like, are you buying sand and putting that together, or how do you build that loam base that you're then adding the 15 to 25% compost to?
So you can get garden mixes from landscape companies, like when you go to actually order the soil, and you can customize those. So if you ask them for their best loam soil and you say, okay, I want 1 yard of that, and I want half a yard of compost, they'll do that for you, and they'll actually mix it for you appropriately and do all the legwork for you. And you can actually go look at that. Whatever you're getting, like landscape soil from someone, there are some questions you can ask. For example, you want to ask what the parent material is. They should have someone on staff that's going to be able to tell you where that topsoil came from. So they'll be able to tell you it's from a forest ecosystem or from a grassland ecosystem. They may even be able to point out on a map exactly where that is. And the only reason I say that is because there's parent materials all across Canada. There's soil orders across Canada. You can Google soil orders of Canada map, and it's going to pop up this really colorful map, and it's going to show you all the different soil parents in Canada. Each one of these soil parents have different attributes to them. So some may be high in calcium, some may be low in calcium, some may have high cation exchange capacity. And it's just going to give you a better idea of how to actually manage that soil that you now have in your garden. And it's going to take a lot of the guesswork out as well.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like one thing that you shared in there that really resonates is that kind of like you do you approach and go with experimenting, right? Because it's
Yes,
there absolutely isn't like a right way and a wrong way definitively to garden, but lots of different approaches that will get varying results. And that's in a lot of ways, I think the fun and the beauty of gardening is like figuring it out and playing around and seeing what you enjoy the most. So one last question that I have on kind of like that compost situation on my end is, how should I fix that bed? 100% compost. It doesn't have the nitrogen in it that I need. I want to get some tomatoes in there this season. What should I be doing?
So what kind of soil is underneath it? Do you know?
It would be just like the fill of my house ultimately.
So you think it's probably clay then?
More so sand than clay would be
Oh
my,
yes, you're in BC.
yeah. Like I
Yeah.
just actually took all the grass out in my front yard, so like 30 feet over. So I'm sure it's the exact same. And it's like very heavy in sand.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Okay. So if we're dealing with sand, what I would do is I would, what I would here, this is going to be like, you're going to have to DM me. We're going to have to take a little while to do this. But what I would do first is let's test for your calcareousness of your soil. So you're going to take some vinegar, bring some soil inside, let it dry out, and then put the vinegar on it. And if you notice bubbling or like fizzing sound, that means you have a calcareous soil. So if that's the case, what we want to do is we want to try to drop the pH down. It means that your water is really alkaline. So it's actually pulling calcium out of the soil and making like a calcareous calcium carbonate substance in the soil. So to reverse that, we would do like sulfuric acid or a phosphate sulfur, something of that nature to lower that pH down. And then if you can, if you're comfortable with it, if you're not, don't do it. But I would rototill about 6 inches and just really mix in the carbon organic material with the actual physical soil and try to get as much interface happening there as possible. And this can do one of two things. It's going to reduce your leaching and it's going to bring your nitrogen up because you're going to have more access to more nitrogen lower in the soil profile. So decomposition can actually take place. So that's kind of your options. I know you want to stay organic. So my other recommendation would be if you don't want to till, throw nitrogen on top, but
yeah, not even like I'm really curious to again just have that like that experimental mindset where I can leave the majority of my garden organic and as much compost as the heart desires, but it could be really fun to play around with that one bed in a completely different manner. And so yeah,
rototill it.
we'll go back and forth by DM, but maybe we'll have to do like videos over the course of the season, comparing that one with your guidance over top of it to just like a pure 100% compost bed directly beside it.
Yeah, that's a cool idea, but you're going to rototill it. Just a heads up.
I've got an electric rototiller in my in my shed there, so
perfect.
I know how to use that thing. Don't you worry. It's also really, really good in the wintertime at removing ice. I figured that out this season.
Wow, that's a pretty good idea.
And you're all good. Hey, I want to shift gears to a question that's come up quite a bit in different variations in the chat function here. And that's kind of around like soil testing, both like the nutritional level for the organic matter, for pH. How do you go about doing that in like a backyard garden environment when you might have 3, 4, 5 different raised beds? What are your thoughts on that front?
My thoughts are I need to start a mainland soil and testing company is my first thought because I get this question all the time. My second thought is, do people really need to do that? And the answer to that is likely not for your home gardener. I would encourage you to do at-home tests as much as possible. So I have some DIY tests on my website that you can do. I've done some DIY test YouTube videos. And then I also have my planner. And in my planner, I have literally, it's not even a planner. I should never have labeled it. It's literally a workbook is what it is. Yeah. And so I have a workbook that you can go through. So there's a ton of different tests that people can do to determine how much calcium they have in their soil. How quickly do they have soil compaction? What's the microbial activity in their soil? And the tests that they can do at home are going to tell them more about their soil than an actual soil test can tell you. So soil testing was designed for agricultural fields. And when people in agriculture get their soils tested, they are doing hundreds of data points across the field, and they're matching that to harvest logs, and they're matching that to fertilizer maps. And we're doing actual prescriptions for the land. Right. So with a garden, in order for it to make sense and be economical, it just doesn't. It just doesn't. Yeah. 100%. Unless you're me and you were influencers, and it's like, okay, you know what? We need to test this to show people our soil and what we're doing and that sort of thing. That's fine. But for your average person, there's a lot of at-home tests you can do. So things you want to look at home pH testing is ideal. There's a cabbage test you can do. I have like a device that I'm launching here pretty quick that's actually going to test soil pH, because I'm so irritated with all the versions out there, like the cheap ones like Canadian Tire and stuff. I was like, no, I'm done with this. So I got hold of some engineers in Toronto, and I was like, build this pH tester. I need something that works. So it works with an app. It's coming out in June. But pH testing, you can do it with purple cabbage. You don't need the actual device. Do a calcium carbonate test, what we just spoke about. I'm going to release a video on kind of the science behind what's going on there. That's going to tell you if your calcium is tied up in your soil or if it's available for your plant. Do the underwear test, cotton underwear, dig it in the ground, put it in, bury it, stick a flag on it. Go back and check it and weigh it every month. See how much of that cotton underwear is disappearing. If it's not disappearing, it means you have really low microbial activity, and we need to work on building that up. If it's gone in the first month, like what happened to me, and I just literally couldn't find it, and then I was second guessing myself, like, did I actually bury something here? Then it means that you have really high microbial activity. Yeah. I was trying to do a follow-up video to the initial video I did, and I was like, where is the underwear? Like, I cannot find my husband's underwear. It's gone. It's gone. Yeah. So anyways, my bird's going crazy in here. But yeah, so you can do that. You can do a coat hanger test. Take a coat hanger, go in the backyard, stretch it out and like poke it in, see how deep you can get it into the soil, and determine based on how many inches you can get in on a grid, whether or not you have compaction or what areas may have issues. I wouldn't be worried about nutrients for the most part. Gardeners, typically every garden test I've ever been sent over email from subscribers and stuff is always really, really high. Gardeners dump the nutrients on. So if anything, I would argue you're probably wasting a majority of your money as a gardener, because I can guarantee you have some of the highest nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels out of the entire planet. Like if you compared a gardener's garden to a farmer's field, it's huge. Now, is it a good thing? No. I mean, there's runoff and there's obviously effects to that, but gardener soil is typically really high nutrients. I would rather have people focus on what texture they have, what kind of drainage they have, doing percolation tests, doing compaction tests, pHs, that sort of thing. And that's going to help you adjust. And those are the things as a gardener you should be adjusting. That's Ella. She's goofy. I wonder if I can get her off. She may be up there now. No, she's like, no, I'm leaving.
Gotcha. Yeah, so lots of different approaches and things that you could ultimately be doing as tests at home there. And super interesting as well that like it's probably not the nutrients that are holding things back from taking like that next level in terms of bounty harvest yield in the backyard garden for most gardeners.
Oh gosh, no. It's very rarely that.
Cool. Well, hey, we have kind of like blown through our time here. We got maybe about 10 minutes left or so here. And so I would love to kind of get to just a couple more of the questions that are coming through in the chat function. And two of them just came through from Kate and Diane. What if my soil, and just before I ask the question, folks, if you have any more questions, go ahead and type those into the chat function. We'll try to get to 2 or 3 of them before we wrap up here. But the question was just like, what if my soil is very high in clay? What should I be doing to work through that?
Yeah. So what I would look at first is doing like an actual texture test and comparing it against the soil textural triangle, and determining if you actually legitimately have 100% clay soil or if you're somewhere in between. And that's going to change potentially how you manage that. Now, if you have a clay soil, the first thing I will tell you, you cannot do no dig. You cannot start no dig. It's impossible. I've seen so many people fail at this. Kevin at Epic Gardening did this, and because he's a Charles Downing nut. And so he did this, and then he did an entire video about how he rototilled his entire garden up. And I told him day one, I DM'd him and I was like, you're going to regret no dig on that soil. Literally like a year or two later, he makes a video about rototilling. So I did an entire commentary on it, and I was like, yeah, you need to rototill. And I'm happy he actually did that video, because that is a huge deal. That's a huge influencer. And so I'm very proud of him for coming out and doing that. So you're going to want to rototill. When you go to rototill, pile on about 5 to 6 inches of compost, and then do a pH soil test. You do the purple cabbage method, determine what your pH is. If it's acidic and we need to raise it, we're going to add lime. If it is alkaline, we're going to add sulfur and we're going to lower it. And so we're going to sprinkle that in with the compost, and we're going to rototill that into about a depth of 12 inches. You will have the most insane harvest of your life for the first 2 or 3 years. It'll be unbelievable. You don't have to rototill again. You can just leave it, unless you're noticing really heavy levels of like snow compaction and that sort of thing. But the reason why you're going to have this explosion is because you have a whole bunch of organic material combined with a ton of glacial micronutrients that's been locked up and unavailable to any plants, solely because that entire clay soil likely only has a couple centimeters of oxygen infiltration. So a majority of the microbes in that profile are living in the first top some centimeters. The moment you rototill that, you have given microbe access to that entire 12 inches of soil. So that's what I would encourage there. You can't do no dig. You just can do intermittent tillage. So maybe once every 5 years, go in and till. There's no reason why you shouldn't. Farmers have done this for 20 some years. They've done no till, and they're starting to realize issues. So they're actually going in and selectively tilling their land to fix it and make it more arable. And if you're noticing really low yields, this is a good sign that it's time to till. For sure, for sure.
Love it. And so I guess kind of continuing on a little bit, is a couple questions coming through here just around like, how do I tell if my garden is like, if there's compaction occurring, and if it's too compact?
Yeah. So there's not, as gardeners, we can't really tell very easily, only because a lot of our plants have pretty ridiculous roots on them. So one way to just fix it without tilling would be to use tillage radishes. So they're called daikon radishes. West Coast Seeds actually just sent me a whole pile of them, and I'm going to show examples of like how they work to break up compaction in the soil itself. But the test would be the coat hanger test and the percolation test. You could do either or. So coat hanger test, you're going to take a coat hanger and you're going to stick it into the soil. You should be getting the entire, like as deep as the root is going, you should be able to get it down at least 6 inches, 12 inches. The deeper, the better. If you're hitting like 2 inches and it's stopping, that's a sign that your soil is heavily compacted, which isn't out of the norm for Canada. So Canada, if our ground does not freeze before the snow falls, the snow will compact our soil because there's no frozen water in the actual soil porosity. And so it just shrinks everything and snaps it up. So soil compaction in Canada is very, very common on land that's being gardened or farmed or anything of that nature. And that's just because of physics, soil physics. The other one you can do is a percolation test. So you're going to dig a test plot. It can be as deep or as large as you want, and you're going to fill it up with water. And then you're going to wait and see how long it takes to drain. If you're noticing like bubbling and stagnant water and it's taking half a day, your soil's compacted. Conversely, if you were to do this, it would be gone in 2 minutes. Yeah. And that's because you have a sandy soil. So,
okay. I think maybe one more question here, and I think we have to go back to the compost and no dig, no till world. And Denise asked, why do no till people say you destroy the soil food web if you till? Would love to hear, I guess, your thoughts on that, um, and, and maybe even just kind of like some high level thoughts on what this soil food web is.
Yeah, for sure. So, soil food web concept is Dr. Aline Ingham's. That's her course that she sells. And so she is a soil microbiologist specifically. So her focus is on microbiology. The reason why the no-till group will say that it affects microbes is it does damage hyphae, so mycorrhizal fungi, hyphae. And hyphae is really common in shrubs, trees, and those sorts of forest type environments. Hyphae is not often seen in ecosystems that are grasslands, tomatoes, peppers, that sort of thing. So their thought process there is that it's breaking up the hyphae, which it is. And when it breaks up the hyphae, it's potentially damaging thousands of years of work that have been put into that fungal network. And a great example of this is there is a protected area in the US. It's absolutely massive. I think it's like 2,000 years old. It's one of the world's largest fungal hyphae networks in the world. As gardeners, and I've studied mycorrhizal fungi. I've actually worked with a company in cultivating these species for phosphate solubilization in the soil. And we can get some species to form a symbiosis, either ecto or endo wise, on some plants, but it's not only tomato needs specific species, it's like the specific tomato species needs a specific species. So I don't find that mycorrhizal fungi products right now are at the level where it's of concern. And not to mention, we're putting really exotic plants that aren't native to Canada in our soil. So the hyphae doesn't exist to begin with. Now, I don't know why they say it destroys bacteria. And this is kind of one of my biggest pet peeves about the no-till crew is they will say that it decimates bacterial colonies and all that sort of thing. And bacteria thrives on oxygen. And so what we tend to see is when people till, we have a massive explosion of growth in the plants. And Kevin actually mentioned this too. He's like, I don't know what happened, but serious activation in plants. And it's because we introduce a ton of oxygen into that system, which otherwise would not exist. So in a classic soil system, the top 2 inches in a grassland soil or a native ecosystem has oxygen. The rest of it is pretty anaerobic. There's not a ton of oxygen happening in there other than potential root or bug work in the actual soil. So for the most part, that is filled with oxygen deprived bacteria. And then the actual nutrient cyclers are at the top, and those are our oxygen eaters. And so when we rototill, it actually activates these bacteria out throughout the entire profile. So I don't know, maybe it's for sales. The best way to say, come join my ideology is to say that the other ideology destroys everything. And so that's the only way to get people to buy into something is to absolutely say the other thing is really, really, really bad and there's no other option. Yeah. But with gardening, and I struggle with this all the time on my YouTube, because I'm sure you've watched videos and you've read some of the comments on more of my controversial videos and you've been like, oh my God, how does she survive? Because I get some nasty comments, but I'm solely using science to explain things. I have zero agenda here. Mm-hmm. So I struggle with this and I want to do more videos on kind of this or that, but my mental health, I do have to take care of it a little bit. So I have to sparsely throw in these controversial videos every once in a while, but this is one of them that it does irritate me. And there's no science to suggest that no-till is like this, end all be all. And there's nothing to suggest tillage is end all be all either.
Yeah.
It's completely dependent on your soil. And you need to experiment. You need to try things. You need to do things that work for you. I don't till my garden, but my grandma, she's got heavy clay soil. She tills every year. She swears by it. If I told her no till and she's an evil person, she'd just kick me out of the garden. She'd be like, yeah, goodbye. I've been doing this for 60 years now. You know what I mean? So experiment. Don't take ideologies to heart.
Yeah. And I think that really is like a beautiful point to end on, is that it is not about like this being right and this being wrong, or there being one right way to garden and a wrong way to garden, but rather like many different approaches, probably all that have pros and cons to them. And it's more so a matter of like experimenting, playing around, figuring out, because like what works for me is going to be different to Kevin down in San Diego and different to you where you're based. And so,
oh gosh, yes,
just so much that is going to vary in each of those different setups and what we're trying to grow. And at the same time, it's like one of the most like liberating and beautiful experiences, because it's not like I'm not coming to this conversation or anything where it's like, this is the right way to do it, but best like, hey, I put these two beds together and this one performed better. That's kind of neat. I'm now going to try this. And that like experimental mindset kind of like makes it no longer a like, my personal philosophy here is that this is the only way to do it, but rather like I realized or discovered these things in this particular experiment, and that was really—
oh gosh, yes, yeah. Like, I mean, I'm a scientist, so my world and the way my brain works is like, hypothetically this could work, let's see if it does. So I'm all for like trying different things, seeing what works for you, see what works for your area. And like one of the common things that people will point out in the no-till community is they'll be like, well, the dirty 30s and the Dust Bowl, like look at what happened when they tilled that ground. And the answer to that I always give is yes, they tilled, but they tilled once, twice a year. They put farmland in an area that got very low precipitation, and farmland should never have existed on. There's lots of areas in the US, South America, where farmland should never be planted, but we decided to do it anyways. Poor life choice on humanity's part. But ultimately, there's like an in-between there. There's the dirty 30s where they would literally stick a plow under the ground and flip topsoil over down to 10 inches. And then there's intermittent tillage, which is what I advocate for in most cases. For you, you're going to literally incorporate some compost. We'll talk about it, but you're going to incorporate the compost and then you're going to leave it probably for 10 years. You'll never do it again, but you don't live forever and you're not going to be able to garden forever. So you're going to sacrifice several years of doing things the right way, because that's what society is telling you, and you're not going to get tomatoes out of it. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Just grow the dang garden and the fruits and the vegetables. I can promise you, your little 8x10 is not going to cause global warming. Guaranteed.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like we could go on about no dig, no till in particular, but all things soil for many, many hours to come here. But I know that it's also getting a little bit late on your end there. So do want to let you run. But Ashley, thanks so much for the just conversation here. And I'm definitely going to be sending you that message about how we go about doing a little video series on kind of fixing or playing around and experimenting with a few of my beds, because I think that would be a ton of fun to be doing there.
Yeah, it would be a good time. Good time.
Cool.
My beds will win. I can guarantee you that.
I love it. I'm just going to go ahead and quickly share my screen here, folks, as we wrap up. As always, we like to do a little free shipping for anybody that does want to get their hands on things. And so one thing that did happen over the course of the last week here was that we actually just hit 250 plus 5-star reviews on our shop there. So all the folks that have been utilizing our products, just having tons and tons of success here. This message from Andy, he's got the whole thing on our website, but was such a cool message to receive because he was literally doing a side-by-side experiment with our seed starting mix compared to just a store-bought peat moss kind of combination thing, and has had just absolutely amazing results with it. And so the kind of area that we're all moving into just around the corner is transplanting and getting things into the garden here. And so folks, if you do want to get your hands on one of our transplant kit, which last year was our absolute kind of most popular item that people were purchasing from the store, then we are doing free shipping on that through the end of the weekend here. And that kind of backyard transplant kit, it comes with 3 bags of the worm castings plus a bag of our 444 superfood. The link to grab that is in the bottom of this video here. So you can grab that on the bottom of the video. And then the code that you want to use at checkout is just Let's Grow 5002. But that is everything for this evening here, folks. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share on that front. I'm going to hang tight for just a moment here. I'd love to hear any kind of thoughts in the chat function in terms of how this first session has been here. And as any of those come through, Mike, if you want to fire into the chat function, or Ashley, if you've got it pulled up on your end, just your YouTube channel so that folks know where to find you and go on that same binging journey that I've been on this past year. If one of you two would be able to throw your YouTube channel there, that'd be awesome.
And I don't even know how to do that, so someone else can do it.
And the second piece again, folks, is our next video is dropping tomorrow. So there should be a little red subscribe button right below the video. And you can just go ahead and click subscribe there and you'll get notified when that goes live tomorrow morning. All right, Christina, very informative. Allison saying very interesting. Amazing. Val saying great hour. I'm not sure what was going on with my audio there for why it wasn't coming through clearly for some folks, because I was seeing some folks saying it was coming through clearly as well, but I'll take a look into that before our next one here. Amazing. Well, folks, looks like we are all set here. Thank you all so much for the time this evening. The next time that we're going to be going live is for one of our happy hours. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. And then our next gardening talk show, the guest that's going to be joining for that one is Christine Covino down in the US. She is an incredible, incredible cut flower gardener. And so we're going to do a whole session just on cut flowers, how to get that going in your garden. It's something that I have done zero of in the past. This is year one for cut flowers. Ashley's laughing at me. I'm laughing at me. It's a real big trial experience area out there. So we'll see how it goes. Honestly, I'm really excited about it because, you know, gardening stuff, worm casting pieces, I kind of need to know my stuff on those areas. But cut flowers, I'm like, I know nothing. I get to just share with everybody what works, what doesn't work, everything in between, all that good stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Love it.
It's a huge thing right now, backyard, like cut flower businesses and stuff.
Yeah, totally.
It's a big deal.
Totally, yeah, absolutely. If we figure it out, maybe one point in time, we'll end up having a cut flower kit, but that will take a little bit of time to ultimately get there.
Yes.
Alrighty, folks, that's all for this evening here. Thank you all so much. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us, being our first guest, and can't wait to just stay in touch with you over the course of the gardening season here.
Yeah, it'll be good. Hopefully the snow will leave.
Yeah, sometime.